about the future. The last 2 or 3 years of those 10 years, I've gotten this number one question all the time, and that is the question of what's going to happen to us, to people in this future. So I wrote this book, Humanity versus Technology, as a response, and I'll talk a little bit about the book today. I think you have some copies at the event for sharing. But first of all, I think we're entering a world of where it's quite clear that we are, in a way, becoming digital. You know, we are connected to technology everywhere. And technology is creating a sort of a global brain of information. And the companies that serve this information are extremely powerful. And part of that is a shift towards this whole new things that are happening, not just digitization, but as you can see here on what I call the mega shifts. Right? It's a moving target of all kinds of things: virtualization, datafication, cognification, smart machines. It's sometimes hard to keep track of this. And since we're talking a little bit about sustainability today, I think for us, it's getting increasingly harder to follow what our position should be in this completely digital world. And it may, in fact, sometimes become a little bit dehumanizing or scary to us, because these are the two things that are running our lives, right? There's the technology, algorithms, and literally right now, I think $1.2 trillion has already been invested in artificial intelligence, machines that can think. And then there's us on the right, you know, people who have human skills, what I call the androrhythms, you know, the human things, emotions, creativity, design, imagination. And what is going to happen with that in a world that is basically subjugated to technology? And just to give an example of the exponential growth of technology, if you took a VW Beetle from 1971, if it had grown the same in power as computers have grown, the computers have grown exponentially in power, the power of computing chips, this car would now go 300,000 miles per hour in speed, and it would get 2 million miles per gallon for a cost of 4 cents. And this is how technology has grown in computing, you know, following this curve that I think you all know pretty well, Moore's law, Metcalfe's law, the exponential curve. Kind of an old hat, and by the way, of course, many Hungarian scientists were involved with that process of making chips that fast, right? But now we're at the takeoff point of this. We're at the point of saying, well, now the stuff that used to be science fiction, language translation, self-driving cars, the cloud, machines that can think, you know, now they're actually happening, and we're reaching things like connecting everything, smart cities, smart farming, smart logistics, augmented reality, which I'll show you shortly, intelligent machines, quantum computing, you know, machines that can be 1 million times as fast. And then on top of that, we're looking at the end of oil. The technology is making it possible to use renewable energy almost exclusively in the next sort of 20 years. And that's really changing our world in a very large way. Of course, the world is going to become more sustainable. In the meantime, we have to put up with dealing with what we have already created. But if you look at this exponential curve, it's quite clear. If you're thinking linear, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you will get completely lost here. Because in roughly 5 to 7 years, we'll be 128, 30 times up the scale, it's 1 billion. So our world is literally going to change at a speed that you would not believe. And part of that change is, I'm sure you're aware of, that we're no longer actually using computers to program anything or to be programmed to do stuff. We now have computers that can learn, what's called cognitive computing. And very soon, you know, we can speak to computers, they'll understand us, they can look at us, they can scan our faces, and they will not be programmed, they will learn what to do. So they become kind of intelligent, not like us, to be sure, not quite yet. But computing will change, as Ginny Rometty from IBM says, it's the end of programming computers, basically cognitive learning computers. That's going to change everything around us. As I like to say in the book, you know, humanity will change more in the next 20 years than the previous 300 years. Industrial revolution, the invention of the printing press, you know, more than 300 years ago. But, you know, we're going to change and basically use technology that's straight out of science fiction. And so the question really is, how is that going to be humanly sustainable, connected directly to the internet, which is becoming possible through brain-computer interfaces. And the key question really is, who's going to say what's right or wrong here? Right? Because machines will make anything possible, really. Nothing remains impossible, including human genome editing. So I think we're going to need some sort of ethics council, some sort of, sometimes I call this the EPA for humanity, the Protection Agency for Humanity, because we're going to need to make sure that we can remain human, because humans are not technology. At least I don't think we are. Some people do. So what do we do about this? How do we actually make this work? How do we create a world where both these two parts of technology, which are obvious, it's always been like that, simply stating that technology has no ethics, never had and probably never will, because it doesn't really exist. So technology is kind of morally neutral, but how we use it makes a big difference. Ethical use of technology. Just to define ethics, in a shortcut here, it's knowing the difference between what you have a right and the power to do and what is the right thing to do. And simply defined, what is the right thing to do? Well, the purpose of technology should be human flourishing, right? Human advancement. Should not just be profit and growth, should not just be the return on your stocks. It should be a larger story of technology. And I think this is really the question as to how will technology be sustainable in a world that looks like this. Right? The lower part is us, the humans. We grow. But we're not going to be exponential. We are limited. We are inefficient machines. Parenthesis. We have to sleep. We have to eat. We make mistakes. We lie. Right? Technology is exponential, but humans are not. And we should keep it that way. So that is a question for us. How do we sustain humanity there in terms of our own space? Because when we get to live to be 150 years old, which is quite likely in the next 50 years. How do we remain human in the world of total technology? Look at these game changers, big data, cloud computing, machines that can think, artificial intelligence. And to clarify here, let's make no mistake about this, these machines don't think like we do. They think like a machine, but they're very good at that. So it's very narrow intelligence. For example, Google DeepMind winning against the world champion in Go. The Internet of Things, connecting everything, smart cities, very powerful. And the most powerful thing in general is the modification of human genes. And that is truly a mind-boggling change. It is different than any other change before because it changes us as people. I mean, if we can save one person from getting cancer or diabetes or Alzheimer's by doing this, we should be doing that. But then again, we can use that technology for really evil purposes, including programming babies, superhumans. Huge ethical challenge, huge opportunity. It's kind of, both really. As the slide shows, it's amazing. It's mind-boggling. There are issues. We should not forget the issues, but at this point, it's primarily positive. I think it's just that we also need to ask the question: how much connectivity, how much technology can we handle? I think you may already be aware that we are now starting to think of offline as a luxury, right? Like we can disconnect and all of a sudden we feel like we're human again because we don't always have to interact and disconnect, right? Offline is the new luxury. That is for sure. So basically what we see here in technology is that this progress is really hell-ven. I call it hell-ven, heaven and hell. It's kind of both. We're going to need some really savvy government companies, technology companies, public officials, academics to figure out how we can keep this mostly heaven without avoiding the hell, too much of a hell. And here's some heavenly things that we're going to see. I mean, I'm an optimist, as you can tell, right? But I think that it's quite likely in the next 20 to 30 years we can solve the food problem, we can reverse global warming, or at least stop it and deal with the consequences. We could slow down diseases, we can desalinate water, we can solve the energy problem. Maybe we can even get to some form of sustainable capitalism, as I call it in the book, post-capitalism, and get a world government that will help us. This is all very positive stuff, and here's the evil stuff, right? I mean, clearly, we are in sort of a battle with technology, right? And the question really is, if we're going to be dehumanized because technology removes the humanity from every process, I'll show you some examples, that could be hell, right? Dehumanizing ourselves because of technology is not a good idea. We see people worried about the future of work. You see here on this chart, I couldn't find the numbers for Hungary, but clearly a lot of people are worried about where this is going. You know, if jobs are going to be extinct. And I don't think there will be. I'll tell you in a second why. But some people have said that we are the horses of the digital age. You know, hundreds of years ago, the horses were the primary transportation mode, and we still have horses today, but they will not be used for transportation. So are we the horses of the digital age? That's a question that is kind of in the room here. And that takes me back to artificial intelligence. You know, what machines can do now is to perform human jobs, and a lot of jobs that are routine will be automated. And this kind of thing that we know from Hollywood, you know, ex machina, this is really, we should forget about this for quite some time, because it really is not the future within any considerable reach. Here on the left is the real future, self-driving cars. They don't have to be truly intelligent, they just have to be fancy computers. And I think it will work to a very large degree. In many instances, it will not work because, for example, on the Deutsche Autobahn, you would not go 250 kilometers an hour using a self-driving car. It will work for things like email. You know, Google has an intelligent response system now. That's all very good. But basically what we see here is the fact that our economy has now changed, going away from the oil and the banking economy, even the military, to the fact that data is the new oil, right? And AI is the new electricity. This is a huge driver of economic progress. It's also a huge driver of conflict. If you can see here, right, the most powerful companies in the world are the tech companies. And I'm not saying this badly. This is just clearly we're going to need regulation, ethics, social contracts to figure out how we share that power. I mean, look at this graph here, right? Almost all of these companies that are running today's world, essentially, are either American or Chinese. Lots of European researchers and stuff in these organizations, but how we're going to regulate them, how will they be made responsible, as we can see with the discussion of Facebook and the election manipulation. Let's go back to the jobs for a second. We have to realize that anything that can't be digitized or automated will be. That's kind of digital Darwinism. On the flip side, that is not going to make us useless humans. I think it's actually the other way around. Anything that cannot be digitized or automated becomes extremely powerful. And it's all the human things that we do every day that will become more important, that machines will never understand. I think they can fake it, they can simulate it, you know, they can fake emotions, but they can't be emotional, they don't exist. And I think that will be that like this for at least 100 years, I hope, maybe longer. And that is where our future is going. That's where our kids need to have education in, right? I mean, we're entering a new era of education that needs to take into account that our kids need to learn what's called the emotional quotient, right? Emotional intelligence, not just the IQ, but balance the right and the left brain, so to speak. In 5 years, our kids will not be saved by the fact that they can be programmers, because computers can do their own programming. We need our kids and ourselves, of course, to learn both the technical part, but also become better human, exponentially human, so to speak, because I think that's our way forward. Because the big challenge is not that machines will kill us or take over or eliminate our work. They will do some of that, of course. But the biggest challenge is that we become like them, that we start thinking like machines, because machines are everywhere. My colleague Luciano Faridi, who's an AI researcher, says that algorithms are fantastic and they outperform humans when it's not about understanding or emotions. You know, basically 90% of our lives are about that, right? They're not about data. So when you use Google Maps or you use Airbnb to offer your house for vacation, that kind of intelligence is powerful, but it's pretty far away from human. It's basically just algorithms. And now we're entering a world where clearly on this graph here you can see the most fruitful and beneficial technologies are also the most dangerous. So on the top right, artificial intelligence, machines that can think, biotechnologies, genome engineering, and on the left, the Internet of Things, the blue circle. Okay, so that leads us to a very simple conclusion. We have to think about this. Do we have an ethical imperative to make sure that these powers are used correctly? And the answer is clearly we do. Because, you know, if we don't, I think this will not end well for us. So here's a couple of suggestions as to how we can use technology to remain sustainable in the future and to make sure technology is a benefit to society. All technology has to have human values. It should be designed for human values, for freedoms, for the cultural diversity. We have to make sure that we solve inequality, and that currently technology is increasing inequality. That's not a good thing. We have to share the benefit. We have to license technology cheaply. We have to benefit and empower as many people as possible. We have to think of this as an ecosystem, not as an ego system. We have to enable participation across all societies and all needs and issues. And we have to make those people responsible that invent technology. That includes social media, search engines. It cannot be that the largest media company in the world, which is Facebook, says that they are not responsible for what they propagate. I think that's an impossible position that needs to be worked on, needs to be looked at in the future. So clearly we're ending here at a place where we can say, well, it's quite obvious, you know, technology is getting stronger by the minute. We still hold the same cards. So we need to design technology to be on top, underneath humanity on top of technology. We have to invest just as much into humanity as we invest in technology. And that goes for research, education, public guidelines, principles, policies. So that's not to say that we shouldn't invest in technology. Obviously, we should invest very heavily in technology, but not without considering what it will do for humans and how we can help humanity. In the book, I state that we should embrace technology, but not become it. And I think that's a great guideline for so many things like cultural activities and research, and of course, the future of work. Right? Embrace technology, but don't think that your work will become inconsequential because of technology. I think that is actually far from the truth. So I want to thank you for your time, and now we're going to open up the microphone. I will stop the screen share, and we're going to get some questions and discuss things. Okay, I'm ready for what you want to ask me. Can you see me now? Yeah? Okay. I can see you nodding. That's good. Okay.
Do you have any questions to get?
Questions or comments? I know there was quite a bit of information at the same time here, but any comments on this? I hope my book isn't coming out in Hungarian anytime soon, but it is out in German and French and Portuguese. So if you feel compelled to want to translate it, contact me. All right. First person that asks a question will get a free book. I don't know how I will get this.